Why is it that people don't succeed at learning languages? I'm going to talk about the excuses people use for their lack of success in language learning, and I'm going to explain what's behind all of this. I was with some people today, and they, at some level, were very interested in learning French. These were Canadians. They were professionally would be very helpful for them to learn French. And from them, I heard 3 excuses, which I have heard before, and I will add a few more. So one was to say, I understand well and I can read well, but I have trouble speaking. Now, my answer to them always is, do you listen to audiobooks? Can you understand audiobooks in French? Can you read a novel from cover to cover? Have you ever tried listening the way I do with mini stories at Link, where my statistics show that, for example, in Turkish, I've listened to some mini stories 60, 70 times. I mean, when you are really motivated and when you understand that you need to get that language sort of ingrained in your brain, you need to generate those connections within your brain, you actually need a lot of listening. And when you do that, lots of listening, you start to anticipate the next word, as I've said before, and you start to be able to plan and project your next utterance, and you start to become fluent in the language. So the excuse to say, well, I'm kind of there because, I can read, probably they're referring to maybe a magazine article, or I understand a few things. But if that same person sits in a meeting where French is flying back and forth in 3 different directions, does that person understand? I don't think so. In other words, we need to do a lot of listening and reading in order to improve in the language. The second reason I heard was, well, I live in Montreal and the local accent is very difficult and I have trouble understanding them. And somehow the problem was the fact that that person lived in a French-speaking environment. Living in a French-speaking environment is a good thing, but it's not the secret to success. I lived in Japan, but I spent so much time in my car and elsewhere listening and reading. I lived in Hong Kong where no one spoke Mandarin, and I learned Mandarin. You can't rely on the fact that the local environment is going to help you learn the language. And part of that is also to say, well, if I speak to the locals in French, they come back at me in English. You're not dependent on the locals. It's nice to be immersed, but it's not a condition of language learning success. You have to put that effort into learning the language through massive input, listening and reading. A variety of strategies, which I have gone into before. The third excuse I heard was a number of these people talking to each other and saying, gee, it's too bad we don't have the same class as last year. They've changed the class, they've changed the school, they've changed the teacher. Again, as if language learning success depends on factors outside their control. The teacher, the classroom. None of these things matter. In today's world, you can access all of the language learning material, books, audio, MP3 files, whatever it might be, beginner material, advanced material. It's all out there for you. Of course, I could add if you use Link, but even without that, if you expose yourself to the language, then you will learn. It's not dependent on a teacher. I told them personally, I don't learn in a classroom, and I consider time spent in a classroom to be a waste of time. Now, I enjoy interacting with my tutors at Link because it's an hour, one-on-one. We have an interesting discussion. I get a report, a conversation report, and I have a record of my conversation reports in Persian, in Arabic, in Turkish, in other languages going back 6, 7, 8 years so that I can constantly review what we did over a long period of time. But we talk about subjects of interest, and then I learn the vocabulary from that interaction. I should add, when it comes to the classroom model, you don't need a teacher to teach the grammar. You look it up. You use AI. It's all there. Another very common excuse is, I'm too old. Well, I'm 80, so that excuse doesn't impress me. If you are motivated, you will learn. You might have learned faster. Maybe I learned faster when I was younger. It's kind of connected to this I have no talent argument. Maybe some people have more talent, others have less talent. Everyone can learn. That's not an excuse. Or you hear the excuse, I have no time. Those people who say, I have no time, do they have no leisure activities? Do they have no activities where they pursue things of interest to them? So really what they're saying is, I'm not very interested in learning languages. I don't have half an hour or 50 minutes or an hour a day or every 2 days to spend on language learning. It's not that I have no time. It is not high on my list of priorities on how I want to spend my time away from my work. Again, related to the I have no talent, I don't have a gene for language learning, is the argument that I have a bad memory. And as I have pointed out many times, language learning is not about memorizing. Language learning is about engaging with the language, generating this sort of neural connections, network of connections in the brain that gradually enable you to understand more and more and to be able to produce more and more of the language when the opportunity arises. Now, one excuse that wasn't used but probably is true is that many people are intimidated because they think learning a language means speaking a language. And I am afraid of speaking a language if I can't speak it as well as my own language. Therefore, I'm not even going to try. And there again, if you invest the time and effort into building up familiarity with the language, vocabulary, the ability to comprehend what you hear and what you read, it'll be less and less inhibiting for you to start speaking in that language. Of course, you'll struggle at first, and of course, you eventually need to speak a lot to speak well. But you, in the meantime, can invest a lot of time and energy into building up your basic competence. And I think finally, many of those who say, I was never good at it, I never did well at school, they have memories of trying to memorize grammar. And that is a self-defeating task. Only once you have accumulated enough knowledge of the language, enough exposure, familiarity, only then do the grammar explanations start to make sense. They are not upfront. They are not an obstacle that you have to jump over in order to learn the language. So my conclusion from my interaction with these people today was a lot of people make excuses for why they can't learn languages. And most of these excuses are not valid. Going back to Lamcato's formula, if you are sufficiently motivated, if you put in the time, you will overcome any of these inhibitions, obstacles, problems that you now see in the way of success in language learning. So I would advise those people to stop making excuses. Thanks for listening. Bye.